Hey you guys, welcome to the Transform You Live show. But before we get into the show, I am absolutely livid about today's guest. Today's guest is Dr. Kendall Williams. Dr. Kendall Williams is a senior vice president of operations for a large contact center based in California. He has over 30 years experience of just in different key leadership roles for companies like AT&T and Nationwide Insurance. He specializes in building and revitalizing world-class contact centers and subscribes to the people first mentality, something we need more of in this world right now. Kendall holds several postgraduate qualifications, including a PhD from North Central University, an MA from the University of Phoenix, a BA from National Louis University, and a certificate of executive leadership from Cornell University. This father of three, he's very passionate about developing authentic leadership strategies and dispelling the hypocrisy that you see in the corporate culture. And this is what inspired him to write the book that you're going to hear more about on today's show, Visions, Values, and Corporate Hypocrisy. It is available on Amazon. So we're going to talk more about that, and we're going to dive into that. Don't go anywhere today. I cannot wait to connect with you guys and give you something that can transform your life. Stay tuned. Hey, you guys. We're going to take a quick break real quick. And if you've been enjoying my show, I know you're going to enjoy another show that I'm going to tell you about right now. This guy who's a podcast, he's a 20-year veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces. He's been in the Army for quite some time, and he is bootstrapped with knowledge. When I say that he's got the stuff, he's got the stuff. Because not only is he speaking out against the pansy trend of victimhood, he's also speaking out against identity politics, modernism. He's also talking about the maxing and relaxing, idle leadership of our so-called failing politics and government in the Western world. It's great that we got somebody who stands for real freedom and prosperity. We need people like that. I'm talking about the Crusty Canuck podcast. They bring weekly episodes on Podbean and YouTube. Go and be a part of the dialogue and the humor on today's issue with the Crusty Canuck podcast. Simply with a listen, a like, and make sure you subscribe. You got to subscribe so you can get all of the weekly details and all of the weekly episodes. You don't want to be, lost in the sauce somewhere. And when you do that, leave some type of comment, leave your timestamp so that you can tell them that, hey, the Transform You Live show sent you right on over. All right, check it out right now. We got the details right in the episode description, and it's somewhere at the bottom right here too. So we are back to the show, and we have with us Dr. Kendall Williams, who is joined with us today, and he is going to take us in depth into all that he has to offer, along with some wisdom. So, Dr. Williams, would you just tell us a little bit about yourself, and also, in your own words, tell us the title of the book, and maybe anything else you want to fill in there?
Absolutely. Yes. Well, first of all, my PhD is in industrial organizational psychology, and I have my master's in organizational management, and my undergrad is in organizational behavior. And I think when you look at those areas of study, that's what really highlights what I'm all about. I consider myself to be a human capital guru. And so what does that mean? That means that as a leader, I have always had an interest in understanding how best to realize sustained success and sustained profits. And what I've come to realize is that profits come through people. And that is really what I am all about. So when you ask me to tell you about myself, that is, I think that really, it really emphasizes what I'm all about as a leader with 30 years of experience. I currently work as a senior vice president for a large call center operation here in Ventura County, California. And I've been in the contact center business for 30 years, and I have seen it all. So I have spent my career just kind of learning, the ins and outs of organizations and how best to achieve sustained success. And what does success mean? Success doesn't mean just profits, because again, profits come through people. The people, in my view, meaning the workers, all the employees that make up the organization, they make up about 2/3 of organizational spend. So with that thought in mind, it just makes all the sense in the world to me that leaders would take the time to understand, how to get inside the heads of the people that report to them, how to gain or win their trust and confidence so they can realize their personal best. And as a result, those people that you inspire will be willing to contribute more of their discretionary effort toward meeting the company goals. My book, Mark, sorry to cut you off, but my book you asked is really centered around that topic, and visions, values, and corporate hypocrisy, the hijacking of corporate conscience. And I'm sure we'll get into it, but the book really highlights the dark underbelly of organizational life when it comes to leaders doing what they should be doing and not doing what they should be doing.
Yeah, and one thing that sticks out the most as you were talking, and it makes really sense with all that you specialize in, is the fact that many of these executives don't take the time to really foster that trust among the cohorts and the people that they work with, the people that they even provide services with too. And we want to talk about that too, because as you mentioned, profits come through people, that trust factor, and I'm wondering, and maybe even the audience wondering too, is maybe that trust factor is maybe if that's even a roll up to what inspired you to write the book, is trying to restore that trust in this particular field.
Yeah, absolutely. That lack of trust. Well, first of all, let's define trust to me from a leader's perspective. First of all, a leader absolutely should be interested in gaining the trust and confidence of their direct reports. And it takes a certain leadership style that appeals to the worker, especially the millennial generation. Millennials are not interested in being told what to do. They're not interested in being managed. So, when you think about leadership, there are certain terms that really suggest superiority, like the term boss, like the term manager. Well, if you're a manager, if you have the title of a manager, what exactly are you managing? If you're managing people, that's a problem in and of itself, because again, people do not want to be managed. I don't know a single adult that wants to be managed. Now, the truth of organizational life is some people need to be managed. What I have always said to my direct reports is, I'm going to give you carte blanche. I'm going to lay out the guidelines and that you should follow. But I'm going to trust, back to that word trust, that you understand the organizational goals. I am going to trust that you are going to do your level best to meet your individual goals and understanding how they roll up at the organizational level. So a leader has to trust that his people will do the right thing. And again, the leader has to has to gain the trust and confidence of their direct reports. And you don't do that through a command and control methodology.
So this disconnect, and it seems like the hurdle is the titles sometimes. People struggle with the titles, and especially, as you mentioned, with the millennial population, and seem like they will need to read this book the most, especially as they assume some of these roles too, because a lot of the baby boomers are going to be phasing out of these roles, and a lot of times people don't know how to fill these roles and really do exactly what you're talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at the evolution of management practice, Decades ago, leaders pretty much led by command and control. And they were more focused on task orientation and how best to accomplish that task at minimal cost. So it was really all about laying out the orders, barking the orders down from your cozy perch and expecting people to follow. That's autocratic leadership at its best. But over time, management philosophy has changed. Back in the 30s and in the 40s, we began to move toward what's called the human relations movement. And that's where the command and control leaders were compelled to understand the human component in organizations. Now, here we are decades later, and we still haven't turned the corner. Companies that have turned the corner are fairly well known, and they're highly lauded across the world. But still, the vast majority of organizations still adopt that command and control. Well, again, got to tell you again, the millennial generation has turned that philosophy upside down, turned it completely on its head. So leaders are on notice, or put on notice. Companies are put on notice that you've got to change your manner of thinking. You've got to change your mental paradigm. You've got to change your approach to leading people.
Okay. So I think you hinted at it, but who exactly is your target market for this book?
Well, the target market is actually the entire organization. I think there's a lot of nuggets in the book for those people that are impacted by ineffective autocratic leadership, the people on the so-called rank and file, and certainly any leader who is interested in understanding how best to go about leading people, not managing people, but leading people, not being a boss, but being a leader. Being a leader takes special understanding and special skills. Oftentimes, Mark, so-called leaders or managers are put in their role because they perform very well at the lower level. Okay, if they were responsible for producing, 10 widgets an hour, and they produce 12. So, Mark, you are hereby appointed as a leader. Well, oftentimes we put people in leadership roles without first determining if they have the right skill set. That's, right, in my mind, equivalent to promoting a person to the position of airline pilot and saying, Mark, you are now hereby appointed as an airline pilot. You've got a plane to fly first thing tomorrow morning, and you're going to have 200 passengers, and then go and fly that plane. Well, maybe you don't know how to fly that plane, So we've got to be a little more methodical in how we assign people to roles that they may or may not be, have the right skill set to fill.
That's a little hard now, Dr. Williams, because we got a lot of people who think they can get an education off of Google, and go out and land a job or think they're entitled to a job, Yeah. Does your book speak to this?
No, I don't. My book doesn't really touch on that. No, but I think you're absolutely right. I think it's incumbent upon organizations and people who are in the position to promote others to understand that we have to take the time to grow and develop our people at every single level. So my book does touch on the need for us to be a little more understanding of what the needs of our employees are. Right. Another way of putting it is employees are customers too. Mm-hmm. We spend a heck of a lot of time as leaders trying to understand what customers want, the external paying customer, but not enough time trying to understand what our internal customer wants, not understanding the direct relationship or correlation or interdependency of our internal customers. We satisfy them. We give them all the resources that they need. We nurture, develop them, right? We help them remove any barriers getting in their way. Well, it's almost a given that the external customer is going to receive excellent customer service when we do it the right way.
Wow,
and we're consistent at it.
That makes a lot more sense. That tends why we run into that problem, or why we get so many of our employees thinking, well, or feeling like they can do the job better than their superiors, because the superiors are not listening to them. A lot of what you're breaking down, really makes a lot of sense, and a lot of my mistakes in the past, having managed over people, I heard what you're talking about echoed through their voices behind my back, unfortunately. How long did it take you to write this book?
Wow, that's a tough one to answer, because that kind of leads me to another question, or another point. I actually started putting pen to paper, quite honestly, about 4 years ago. But the problem is ideas just kind of pop into my mind left and right. And at some point that creates like information overload and it makes it really tough. And I think I don't necessarily consider myself to be a writer per se, because I haven't established consistency at writing published materials. But I think anyone that has written would tell you that it's a very iterative process, meaning you have to do it over and over again, and you're constantly changing and striking out information and ideas as they come and go. But once I really settled on the topic, I would say it took me about 1.5 years.
Okay. So it seems like this is very anecdotal with the information. Are there any particular key learnings that the readers can take away right away and maybe apply, or some things that they can ponder on? As I'm looking at the thinking man, I can't help but wonder.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. What people are telling me so far, I've gotten several feedbacks on the internet and from family and friends and coworkers. And one of the very first things, I think the really key outcome of their reading is that it caused them to be introspective, especially those in leadership roles. It caused them to reflect on some of their experiences in corporate life as a rank and file, the so-called rank and file, or as a leader. Really caused them to think back to certain instances and events in their career. And it caused leaders to really think about their own leadership style and whether or not they themselves are hypocritical.
Right. How so? I mean, because that right there, that can mean many things for different people.
Mm-hmm. The term hypocrisy?
Yes.
Well, hypocrisy comes in many different forms. For instance, the book really focuses on what companies say on paper in their culture manifestos. Culture manifestos being defined as the codes of conduct, the values, the company values. Many companies, for example, like to say our employees are our greatest asset. Well, it's one thing to say it. Well, first of all, the book touches on the fact that has been proven wrong for reasons to go beyond this session here. But people are not assets; they're people. Okay, assets must be owned. They must be controlled. They must have a value. You can't put a value on people. So that is just fundamentally flawed thinking to even suggest that employees are our greatest assets. It's a noble proclamation, absolutely. And I think many companies mean well when they say it, but when you lift the veil and look at what's going on within the company, and you're asking yourself some questions, well, are you staying true to what you say on paper? If people are your greatest asset, why is it that when you have to cut costs, the first place you go is to the people? Instead of looking across the organization, to identify wasteful spending, why do you cut people? If they're your most valuable asset, why are you so hastily sending them to the unemployment rolls? While leaders are collecting big fat bonuses for meeting their ROI, right? Improving their margin.
Right.
So that's flawed thinking. That's hypocritical thinking.
Yeah. Man, well, that really puts it in a huge perspective that like maybe I haven't really thought about, but just even taking that into high consideration, you can really see why many people are protesting really hard against what you're talking about, with why many CEOs are even deserving of the bonuses, and they're not even properly compensated. Some of their employees, they're stamping, $15 an hour on people's foreheads, and not even considering the human value of a person. So that's very, very thoughtful. What was the most challenging part of writing this book? Because I can see, I can see some things that might have been challenging and maybe might get some pushback. But what about for you?
Well, for me, Mark, and I'm not sure that every person that attempts to write would say the same thing here, but with 30 years of experience, In all of my studies at the PhD level and master's level and bachelor's level, I have accumulated so much clutter in my mind as I've observed ineffective leadership and what the effective leaders do that's so successful and what ineffective leaders do that cause disastrous consequences. So I've had all these things in my mind, and it's been so, my antenna has been raised so high for decades now that I kind of stored them away in my brain. And then when I began writing, all of those ideas kind of surfaced. And it again, as I said earlier in this session, it really took me about a year and a half to really settle in on a topic. But even once I finalized a topic, I still had a ton of ideas. And we live in a society where the press is going, the press mill is going 24/7 through social media. So new ideas of hypocritical actions taken by leaders in churches and schools, they're surfacing almost every hour of every day. So I found myself constantly iterating over and over and over again until at some point I had to put a stake in the ground and say, this is it. I don't care what else happens, especially in the Trump era. When I was doing the writing, I said, I don't care what else happens in the external environment. I'm going to lock in on these particular points, this topic, and finalize the book.
I like that. Being that you definitely have written some books before, and maybe what was those books, and maybe do you intend on writing more?
Well, I think the answer is probably yes. And I can't honestly say that I have a passion for writing, but I do have a passion for improving the work lives of all levels of the organization, including the leaders themselves. So, and I'm sure through that passion, comes the desire to make a change. And I think one of the most effective ways to make that change is to call attention to it. And I think one of the few ways that can be done is through books and through public speaking, etc.
Okay. And just the mere fact that you coined the human capital guru, one would assume that far aside from just the life experience that you are pouring into the book and just the skills that you already acquire, what research are you doing to sit down and start books, and how long does it usually take you? How long are you spending to research?
Yeah, well, I did a ton of research. Most PhD programs are heavily research based. So a lot of what's in the book now is informed by my PhD studies and through 30 years of experience. I am one, Mark, who has always had always kept a journal. Even before I became a quote unquote supervisor, which is a term that I despise, but back then I was a supervisor for AT&T earlier in my career. I was taking notes and keeping a journal, and I've got tons of journals here on my bookshelf that I often refer to, but I'm also a member of many organizations, and I do research through those organizations. I also write white papers, and obviously I read a lot of business books too.
Okay. Yeah. So, and just along those lines, and just to continue, down this path we're talking on, like just your writing career, currently here as we get closer to time. So when did you realize you wanted to be a writer? Some fun questions here coming your way.
Well, I never really aspired to be a writer, but so I would kind of turn that question around and ask myself, well, when did I realize that I wanted to effect change within organizations? I began working in my family restaurant. It's called Eddie's Restaurant in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with my uncle, my mother's brother. I was the tender age of 9. I was a slush boy, and I worked there for many, many years and worked partially through my my undergraduate degree. And I discovered at that point that I had a real passion for serving others. And as that began to take shape, that serving others, I began to ask myself, well, what is it that we can do as leaders in organizations to better serve others? And what does serving others mean? Does it just mean serving customers or serving people that report to you, which are actually internal customers, as I said earlier? So I would have to say I really discovered my passion for serving others and improving organizational life many, many, many years ago. But I think it really came to a head during my PhD studies. That's when I said, I've got to write a book, which is a natural outcome of PhD studies. I did my dissertation on a similar subject, and I knew at that point, back in 2016, when I was working very aggressively on my dissertation, I knew that I would parlay that into an actual book.
So, and just switch gears just a little bit here. Maybe you mentioned like, as at age 9, you were doing some things. What did you want to do initially as a child? What did you want to do? What did you want to do?
Yeah, I think like many little boys, I wanted to be a policeman. That didn't last long.
Yeah.
Again, as I began, I would say I was about 6 or 7. I just said policemen used to walk the beat. They called it walking the beat, where the policemen would actually be on the streets in the neighborhoods and handing out candy and talking to kids. It's so fun, but times obviously have changed dramatically since then. But I did want to be a policeman. I think it's because of that interaction with the policemen in my neighborhood. Yeah, and I realized I wanted to just go in business because my family is very heavily involved in business. I had several family members that operated their own businesses quite successfully. And so I would have to say that's really where my passion for business was born.
Yeah. So yeah, that definitely makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. You having been around business all your life. That's definitely something I can resonate with, and a lot of my audience, they definitely can resonate with that as well. So being that you're an author now, and you even got the possibility of writing more books. What advice would you give someone on writing their first book?
I would say, number one, anyone who finds themselves thinking consistently about writing a book, do it. Don't procrastinate. Just start writing. Write ideas on paper, in your notepad, on your phone, whatever the case may be. Write them down and save them, because at some point, that interest is going to turn into a passion, and then you're going to just say, hey, throw down the gauntlet and say, I'm going to start writing today. And you've got that whole reservoir of information that you've collected over time. I would also highly promote self-publishing. There's a lot of advantages to self-publishing, and also networking is also critically important. Networking and marketing, start early.
Beautiful. Well said and brilliant. Dr. Williams, we thank you so much for joining us here today. If we wanted to get in touch with you, I know you got a website out there. If we want to check out more of your stuff and definitely get the book, how would we go about doing that?
Well, 2 websites. Number one is humancapitalguru.com, humancapital, CAPITAL, guru, GURU.com. That's my author website. And you can find the book, Visions, Values, and Corporate Hypocrisy on any major retail outlet online. That's Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and so on.
Outstanding. Well, we thank you, for joining us here today on the podcast. You're definitely free to visit us anytime. It's been a absolutely joy and very fruitful in sharing in the wisdom that you had to bring forth to us today, and take us through a tour and a journey through your life as well as this great book. We'll be sure to support your efforts in this book and all that you're doing. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls out there that's checking this out, we do got the episode, in the episode description and of the playback and of this recording, you can find those links that Dr. Williams just mentioned below or to the side, however you are watching or viewing. You will find those there. Make sure you hit the click. Make sure you share to someone you know, someone you don't know. Stay tuned. Do not go away. There's some final words on the other side. Until next time.
Hey, I just want to tell you guys real quickly, after talking with Dr. Kendall Williams about his brand new book, Visions, Values, and Corporate Hypocrisy, I'm very convinced that this book can help just about any executive, any corporate employee who's looking to just level up their game. As someone who was a failed leader themselves, managing it over a team, I can tell you one thing, that for sure you can just hear the arguments that Dr. Williams make loud and clear about how leaders fail to align their actions with company values that results in just these disastrous consequences in the business, amongst the employees, and amongst the consumers. It's pure hypocrisy that we see in the corporate world. And this is why, the book, Visions, Values, and Corporate Hypocrisy is going to be one that you want to pick up and start reading more about. Dr. Williams has got all the right stuff for you in this book. Check it out. It's available on Amazon right now. I got the link somewhere and at the bottom to the left or right, or however you're listening or watching right now. And leave them a review. Tell them how you really feel after you have read it once through.